All right, welcome to episode 4 of the JP Pod. Let's get right into it. Today, Julian Assange had a big court case or a ruling on if he could be extradited back to the U.S. or not. The UK ruled against his extradition back to the U.S., claiming the possibility of a death sentence in the U.S. So it appears that the U.S.'s death sentences policies saved Julian Assange in this case. His life would be at risk if Assange was in the U.S., Look at Mike Pompeo has already ordered for him to be murdered. So I believe if he was in the U.S. prison systems, they could find a way to kill him in there. I mean, the CIA and U.S. government agencies do not want Julian Assange alive. They've already proven that. Like I said, Mike Pompeo ordering for him to be murdered for simply illustrating the government agencies' illegal activities. The Julian Assange case is a perfect example of the out-of-control criminal high-ranking officials and agencies like the CIA and the FBI, including other government agencies. When you have a government official like Mike Pompeo ordering the death of a journalist simply because they're pointing out your illegal activities, that is dangerous. To have those people in power in our government is extremely dangerous and puts civilians' lives at risk. Mike Pompeo is not the only one. There are many criminal high-ranking officials who try to have their agendas reached in ways like this. To have people murdered, life means nothing to them. If you're their opposition, then and you're making things harder for them to achieve their agenda and make money, then your life doesn't mean much to them at all. They'll have you killed or order to have you killed like that. I mean, why is Julian Assange even in the UK in the first place? He hasn't committed any crime at all, period. But he hasn't committed any crime in the UK either. So why is he in another country? I mean, I think it's ultimately for his good to be there, because I think his life is extremely at risk here in the U.S., considering the people who want him dead. But why is he even in another country to start with? It's all very confusing. And the power that these criminal members of our government have is dangerous, and it's illegal, and it wrecks what our democratic system is about. I mean, who has the power in our government right now? Is it the president? Or is it agencies like the CIA and the FBI and people in the background, unelected officials? I'm not saying that people like the president or Congress or the Supreme Court, like they don't have power. But how much power do these agencies have, like the CIA and the FBI and the NSA? How much power do they have? What are they doing behind the scenes illegally to have their own agenda pushed? I mean, stuff like overthrowing foreign governments, putting people in power in foreign governments. I mean, look what they did in Ukraine in 2014, which was really the start of this conflict with Russia, overthrowing a government in Ukraine that was not for our interest, and putting in people who will abide by everything the West wants them to do. How much power do those agencies have? And if you look at what our system of government was supposed to be in the first place, is the people have power through electing officials that they think is best for the nation, and then those people make decisions, but ultimately the people in the states have the ultimate power. If you have agencies like the CIA and the FBI and the NSA really making decisions without talking to Congress, without consulting with anyone, simply going rogue and doing things on their own, these aren't elected officials. These are people placed in power. A lot of people don't even know their names. They're not in the public eye. And if they're making such crucial decisions, including having journalists murdered, that's a problem, because that ultimately wrecks from within the democratic system that our founding fathers put in place in the first place. They're making decisions not based off of the citizens' interest or what's good for the country, simply what's good for those agencies and what puts money in their pocket. Mike Pompeo doesn't have a right to order someone to be murdered just because he is exposing the government's illegal actions like spying on its own citizens. Mike Pompeo doesn't have a right to have any U.S. citizen murdered. You're the director of the CIA at the time, and you're having your own citizens to be murdered simply because they're pointing out your own illegal activities. That is obviously, I don't have to tell you, that's criminal, but he's not going to be held accountable because of his position and what the people in power, they're not going to let him be held accountable for this, obviously. The deep state must be dismantled and power brought back to elected officials put into power by the people. I'm not saying you get rid of these agencies over like absolute, but the criminal members of this who are at the top and have become out of control and are wrecking our country, they need to be handled. They need to be taken out of power. Obviously, the CIA does great work and is crucial to our government and to our military. So the CIA should not be gotten rid of, nor the FBI. But the criminal members of those agencies who are at the top, who are doing these illegal activities, need to be dealt with. Because, like I said, they're making decisions not for the country's interest and are making decisions that go against the country's interest for those agencies' interests. The CIA has gone completely away from the intended, what it was made for in the first place. It's not simply intelligence anymore. It's a weapon against United States citizens. And that's a problem. It's become rampant, out of control, and it needs to be dealt with. And the Julian Assange case is a perfect example of that. Journalists should not be attacked for doing their job and pointing out your illegal activities, especially to have them murdered, let alone be put in jail in the first place in a foreign country, in a country they haven't even committed a crime in, let alone committed a crime here at home. This case, journalists are at risk. I mean, you look at Tucker Carlson, he gets threatened by the NSA for having an interview with Putin and being spied on. They told him they were spying on him and suggested, we suggest you not go. How does the NSA have the right and authority to spy on him in the first place? This is becoming a problem, and free speech is at risk. Citizens' freedoms in general at risk. I mean, you shouldn't have to worry about being spied on by your own government. It's a different case, obviously, if you're a terrorist planning to commit a terrorist attack, and it can be stopped if they're able to spy on him and nip it in the bud before it happens. But if you're simply being a journalist and doing what journalists do, which is interview people, foreign leaders, get to the bottom of stories like Julian Assange, and you're being spied on and threatened and thrown in jail, that's an issue. That is agencies running rampant, going rogue, and need to be dealt with and put in place. Putin talked about the West's hypocrisy concerning Julian Assange, saying it's a, quote, pot calling the kettle black. I believe what he was referring to there is how we constantly talk about Putin's throwing journalists in jail and opposing people and parties in jail and throwing any opposition in jail, which he does. But he's illustrating like they're doing that with Julian Assange and others. And the hypocrisy there to claim that we're a democratic beacon of the world and freedom of speech and journalism is like the U.S. is where that's allowed and free, and yet we have people like Julian Assange in jail. That's hypocritical. And he's absolutely right. I'm not saying Putin doesn't do that himself, but he's absolutely right in the hypocrisy that of the United States when we're doing that to our own journalists. So this is becoming a problem, and journalists, like I said, their freedoms to do their job are at risk when you have people like Mike Pompeo ordering to have journalists murdered for simply doing their job just because they don't like him, and he's causing a problem for the CIA. Hopefully, the Julian Assange case can be settled to where he's ultimately free, and we don't have to worry. It doesn't become an issue of extraditing him to the United States as a criminal, but ultimately he can be free, period, because, like I said, if he comes to the U.S. is in the U.S. jail systems, I think he's ultimately at risk just as much as he's free. There was an incident with a cargo ship in Baltimore that wrecked a bridge. I was just watching Biden just address the media. It was about like 5 minutes. It was the usual, what you would expect him to say. He didn't really provide much new information or say anything interesting about it. Just kind of making a statement to say he made a statement on it. But this was a very weird instance. There was a video of the instance happening, actually, and you can see a cargo ship is going to pass under the bridge, and then as it's coming up to the bridge, its power just goes out, and it steers right into the bridge. Yeah, this is a common occurrence of cargo ships' their power magically going out. This isn't something that happens very often, especially conveniently right as it's passing a bridge or going under a bridge. Was this a cyber attack? I would say don't rule it out. This is, like I said, this is very odd for a cargo ship like this to magically lose all its power and steer right into a bridge. I mean, there's just something fishy going on there, right? I'm not saying that the U.S. did this. I'm saying maybe a foreign entity like China or Russia or Iran somehow cyber attacked this specific cargo ship, or there was something. I'm saying that this is highly unlikely to just kind of happen on its own. And Maryland has already ruled out terrorism, like somehow terrorists hijacked the cargo ship and ran into the bridge or something. I don't know. They've declared a state of emergency. They're worried about 7 people were potentially in the river. They were driving on the bridge when this happened. I believe one has been found safely, and there was one that was found out of the river and is currently in critical condition. There were also workers on the bridge when it collapsed. Like I said, this whole thing's just really weird. I mean, we don't know much about it yet. It just happened this morning. The only thing that's come out behind this is that they don't have any reason to think that this was a deliberate act, like the pilot or captain of the cargo ship did this on purpose. I mean, there's video of the power going out. So obviously deliberately the captain of the ship didn't just decide to run it into the bridge. There was a malfunction, like the power went out. Like I said, how many times does that happen? Like, is that just kind of a common occurrence for the power on a ship to just go out conveniently as it's crossing a bridge like this? I believe this could be a potential sabotage from a foreign enemy. If you look before World War II, there were sabotages going on under the radar and countries opposing each other. And look over the last year or so, there have been many train derailments. I mean, so many train derailments, and they were always carrying toxic chemicals, and conveniently train derailed over a river or a body of water or something, and those chemicals get into the body of water. And if you look at all the people we're letting into our country, I mean, it's not a secret. It's not a conspiracy theory. The amount of Chinese military-aged men that have been found or not found are trying to come into the country at the border. The same with terrorists from the Middle East. I mean, there's been Hezbollah terrorists caught trying to get into the country. I mean, how many have slipped through the cracks and gotten in? So if you look at the people who are in our country that could potentially commit these acts of sabotage, is something like this out of the realm of possibility? I don't think so. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for somebody to hack into the cargo ship and turn its power off and have it wreck into a bridge. I mean, those little acts of sabotage, I mean, this could be China testing out how to get into our infrastructure systems. If they can hack into power grids, not only on specific ships, but the grids itself, and shut off our power. I don't think it's crazy to assume that at all. Obviously, we're not going to say conclusively that's what happened. I mean, it may come out that there was a malfunction within the ship that is provable, like they have proof that happened and there was no outside interference in it. That could happen. But I don't want to jump to conclusions too fast. Like I said, it's pretty new and it happened this morning. But as of now, you can't rule sabotage or a cyber attack or something out of the realm of possibilities for what happened here. So, like I said, there's not too much to say on it yet. It just happened, but it'll be interesting to see if the narrative kind of goes a certain way, as if it's kind of guided to turn our attention away from something. If there's some like pre-written, I don't know, reason for it. All I'm saying is it'll be interesting to see how the government steers this. If it kind of seems odd that they're all pushing a certain narrative for what happened like really hard, then maybe something fishy or something suspicious did happen with it from a foreign entity. But we'll see. More to come out on this later, obviously. This just happened this morning, but just keep an eye on what potentially the government will say will happen or what did happen. The Supreme Court is hearing a case on an abortion bill today on if abortion pills are allowed and if the FAA can be sued for having this abortion pill. If this gets nipped in the bud to where this pill cannot be allowed, then I think it's a positive sign. Obviously, Roe v. Wade was overturned last year, which I think was a very positive sign. I'm very pro-life. Any action to lower the number of lives on this planet, and especially in our country, should be stopped. I mean, the U.S. fertility rate in 2021 was 1.66 births per woman, and in the 1950s, it was 3.7. So there's a very sharp decline in birth rates in our country, and what does that tell you? That if that trend continues, then we're not going to have any more people. So any action to stop life from taking place, to end a life before it even starts, should be stopped. I mean, even if you don't think that a fetus is a life in the womb and that life doesn't begin at conception, that fetus is ultimately going to become a person. So you're stopping a life from taking place. You're taking away another person to be in the United States population. And the rates of birth continuing to go down, the population rate continues to go down. Unless you bring people in from third world countries to replace those people. This is the whole great replacement theory, and it's not really a theory or a conspiracy theory. There's books written on this. This is not some conspiracy theory that somebody came up with. No. This is something that books have been written on. This is something that is currently being implemented. When you have a government pushing for lives to be ended before they even start, and the killing of babies, and then importing illegal immigrants from third world countries, you are replacing American lives with foreign people, aka a great replacement. The argument for abortion, they like to say that they like to point out the circumstance of the mother's life being at risk for giving birth, and that is greatly exaggerated. Any threat of that happening is handled and can be handled with a C-section. A C-section gets rid of pretty much all risks involved in that scenario. There's no excuse to kill a baby in the womb. I'm not arguing that people who can't afford a baby or if they can't properly raise it, that they should have the baby to raise, put it up for adoption. There's no excuse to end a life, period. There's no excuse to not let that baby have a chance at life. Even if it's not under if you can't properly raise it, or if you can't afford to have it, great, put it up for adoption. If your life's at risk, or there are risk concerns with having the baby, then great, have a C-section. Like, there's ways around it. There's no excuse for not having the baby or killing it in the womb. This country and the world needs more people. The world's birth rates are going down. You have people like Elon Musk who have been very public on that we need to have more babies. We're a world in decline on people. And what's to blame for that? Obviously, abortion is one thing to blame. The selfishness of people in general, they don't see the need to have babies. I mean, one of our greatest gifts as people, and women especially, is to produce life, to have birth, to produce a human being, one from your own genes. And the selfishness, especially from the feminist movement, of not wanting to have a baby because it's selfless in raising another human being, and they think, oh, well, it'll save me a lot of money, save me more time, and I don't have to be responsible for another person. So I think that is mainly to blame for the birth decline, especially in the United States. But if you look in other countries like China and Russia, they're not having this problem nearly as badly as we are. So what does that tell you? It's a cultural problem. It's a cultural problem of anti-babies and selfishly not wanting to produce life. And you can have sex all you want, unprotected sex all you want, and then you can just kill the baby in the womb, and that's evil. It's selfish the whole thing is selfish. Like I said, even if you can't raise the baby yourself or don't want to, fine. Put it up for adoption. There's ways around that stuff. There's not a way around ending a life and selfishly ending a life. I mean, it's the most selfish act. It's murder is what it is. Like, again, I think the whole argument of whether it's a life when it happens is stupid, because what's it going to eventually be? A human. So you're ending a life. You're ending what will eventually be a life. You're stopping a life from taking place. Murder. And the act for selfish gain in your own life, in your own interests, and I can have sex all I want and then just kill the baby when it happens. I mean, it's the most selfish act you could do, arguably. Ending another life for your own well-being, especially one coming from you. You're producing the life and then ending it prematurely. It's evil is what it is. And you have President Biden openly threatening the Supreme Court justices during the State of the Union for overturning of the Roe v. Wade Act. That's insane. I mean, don't even go down the route of a president threatening a Supreme Court justices. I mean, the whole reason of checks and balances is completely thrown out the window now. I mean, that's authoritarian to threaten Supreme Court justices just because they rule something that you don't like or it doesn't further push your agenda or your party's agenda. I mean, I'm not even going to go down that route, but that just illustrates where our country's going, that the people in power want killing of babies. They're pushing for it. So there's a lot at risk here globally, especially with the population rates and the birth rates going down dramatically. I mean, that eventually leads to extinction. So that problem needs to be fixed logically. But on the home front in the United States, we have to fight for life, the freedom for babies to be born. It's kind of crazy. I mean, if I would have said that like in the 1950s, where there was almost four births per woman on average, that we're going to have to fight for the rights for babies to be born in 2024, they would have thought you were crazy. But that's where we are. And for some reason, the left hates life. They want to import people from other countries to replace Americans and then put an end to American babies being born. This is a fight that needs to be fought. It's a very important one. And I'm glad that the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And hopefully they'll overturn the right for this abortion pill to be in stores, on shelves of stores. So, like I said, this is a very important fight for us to have, the pro-life fight. Not only for the birth rates, but for life to exist in general. I mean, to stop murder from taking place. It's a spiritual battle. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this later on in the podcast, but not only the ending of babies' lives, but also the sexualization of children. If you notice, it's only going on one side, on the left. It's not going on the right. This isn't a right issue problem. The left is where this problem is occurring. The weaponization against children and unborn babies. So hopefully the Supreme Court rules correctly on this. Deliberations began today on this, but like I said, any push or any choice to be made for unborn babies to be born and for life we need to go that route. Not only for the reasons of the population rates and the birth rates in decline, like I said, but it's a spiritual battle, and we must be on the right side of that battle. Hamas met in Tehran today with Iran. Further proof, if people didn't believe it in the first place, that Hamas is a direct Iran proxy. There were some interesting quotes from this meeting. The Hamas leader said, quote, "There's a new world order forming and the West is losing its power." Is he wrong? Not really. He's not really wrong. You have organizations like BRICS, which is giving countries a safe haven from the weaponization of the US dollar and our own stupidity, driving our enemies to be allies with each other. Look at Russia and China. Would they be allies if it wasn't for our constant provocation and isolation and animosity? The unipolar war is ending, and the U.S. doesn't know how to respond to it. What I mean by the unipolar war is the U.S. kind of being the main world power and controlling everything. All the trades globally being made in U.S. dollar predominantly. I mean, you look at deals are being made in the Chinese currency, I believe it's the yuan, and in rubles, and oil dealings, which have never happened before globally. Deals are being made globally with the dollar less and less and less. What does that tell you? That the U.S. is not having power to sanction people. I mean, that has been our main way of getting what we want done, is that you trade with our currency, so we're going to sanction you, and now you can't make money because you have to use our currency, and if you don't do what we want to do, too bad. Here's a sanction, and you're not going to be able to make money because you use our currency. But now, places like BRICS is a safe haven for those countries who don't want to be weaponized by our own sanctions and the U.S. dollar. Now they can go towards, well, they're talking about having their own currency, their own digital currency, which will happen eventually, I believe. And the U.S. will have no power over these countries anymore. We can't sanction them and get what we want done. And China and Russia are now becoming the countries of like, hey, come here. We won't sanction you. We won't weaponize our own currencies against you. Use our currency and you can make money freely. Use the ruble, use the yuan, and you won't have to worry about getting sanctioned or being weaponized with currency that you need to trade with. That's what I mean when the unipolar war is ending. A multipolar war, a multipolar world is here of the US and China and Russia. Those are mainly the three. And when you have two of them are enemies against one, then who's probably going to lose in that scenario? Probably the one. Especially when organizations like BRICS are rising and slowly the one is losing its power over the world. The West is declining in general with obsession over gender, sexuality, killing babies, like I mentioned, the sexualization of children, while countries like Russia and China, along with everyone in BRICS, has strong men, stable homes, stable ideologies. Whether you agree with their politics or not, whether you think they're authoritarian, which they often are, but aside from that fact, they don't have an issue of worrying what gender you are, worrying about killing babies. Their birth rates aren't in decline, and if they are, not nearly as much as the West is. They're not obsessed with their sexuality. So if you look at that scenario, you have 2 against 1 of China and Russia against the U.S., and the U.S. is declining in terms of their obsession with gender and sexuality and sexualization of children and such, like I mentioned, and the other two don't, then that even gives you more reason to think that they're going to win in that scenario, because they're not having a declining of civilization like we are, let alone the population of China and Russia versus the U.S. So if God forbid, it ever did come down to a military conflict, they would have much more people to pull from. And even with the United States and NATO, I mean, if the U.S., if NATO as a whole, including the U.S., fought Russia, we would be extremely undermanned against Russia, let alone put in China, which has the largest population in the world. That's not a very even fight, and we would be doomed. And yes, we have the strongest military in the world, equipment-wise, but at the end of the day, we got to have enough men to fight the other country. And we've pushed Russia to be allied with Iran, along with China and North Korea, because when Russia comes to us in the early 2000s and wants to be aligned against Iran to keep them from developing nuclear capabilities, and we tell them no, and now they're allied with Iran. So now when you look at the Israel conflict, we now have Russia and China backing Iran against our ally, Israel. So in every facet of global affairs, you've got them going against us. It's essentially turning into BRICS versus NATO, even though BRICS is an economic alliance and not a military alliance like NATO is. Pretty much every country in BRICS is against NATO. So that's kind of where the divide is globally. I mean, BRICS is Brazil, Russia, Indonesia, China, and South Africa. But now they added countries, and I believe Brazil. Well, Brazil was already in it. I can't remember. They expanded recently and added countries. But my point is, every issue globally is turning into BRICS countries versus NATO countries, and that's, if there ever were a world war, God forbid, to take place again, that would be the fight pretty much. The nations in BRICS like Russia, China, North Korea, Iran versus NATO and the West. And the U.S. isn't realizing how much of a fight that would be. The U.S. is greatly overestimating how much grip and power it currently has over the world. I mean, if they do realize how much power they're losing, they're not making it known. I mean, they're not doing anything to show that. They're still trying to sanction people. I mean, our sanctions against Russia for invading Ukraine have not worked. Their manufacturing of weapons is still, I mean, it's going up. And they're not poor as a nation. Their economy greatly succeeded ours in many areas last year. So our sanctions haven't worked, partly because our countries can trade in rubles now in many ways that they weren't able to before. And their economy is growing because they're not reliant on the US dollar anymore. They're not reliant on our currency to make deals. They're becoming independent on their own currencies to make money. So that is the perfect illustration that we're losing power because our dollar doesn't mean what it used to mean anymore. We can't sanction people and get what we want done anymore because, like I said, BRICS is becoming a safe haven for those countries. So, all that to say, I went down a little tangent there. All that to say is what the Hamas leader is what he's saying wrong? No. There's a new world order forming and the West is losing its power. Russia and China with Iran and Hamas, who is an Iranian proxy, they appear to be going on the up. I mean, everybody backs Hamas and Iran against this war, or with this war against Israel. So the West is losing its grip and its power on other countries, and we don't realize it. And we're going down with a fight. And we're white gripping it here, white knuckling it. We're not letting it go. And eventually it's just going to all come toppling down. God forbid. If we change our ways and start to be more open to other countries and instead of weaponizing everybody, and we can't accept not being the top dog anymore. We have to accept that a multipolar world is coming. It's here. It's essentially here. And if we want to still exist as a nation, or let alone thrive as a nation, then we have to change what we're doing. We have to change our ideologies, and we have to accept, look, this is where we are as a world. You either adapt or die. And it appears that the United States is not adapting. We're not adapting to a multipolar world. If we can't be number one, then we're going to go down fighting. So, there's many wars that can illustrate this, and the Israeli war against Hamas is the main one because our main ally, Israel, is losing its support, and we're abandoning them, and everybody globally is backing Iran along with Russia and China. So we have to realize this. We have to wake up and realize what's going on. People are forming against us. There's countries don't need the United States like they used to. They don't need us for our dollar because they have to trade with our dollar. So the United States is not needed to have, countries don't need to have good relations with the United States like they used to anymore. They don't need to bow down to us and kiss our feet and do what we say because, God forbid, we get sanctioned and we can't make money as a country anymore. Those days are over. People have countries like Russia and China, which we have isolated ourselves from and completely provoked. And we're so stupid. If you completely provoke people, eventually they're going to find ways to adapt and they don't need you anymore. And that's where we are. So if we want to continue to thrive as a nation, which you could argue we're not really thriving as it is right now, we have to adapt. We have to change our strategy. We have to change what we're doing. And to go about that, we probably need a change of leadership, obviously. But we need new policies in place to where, we had a president like Trump who didn't consistently start wars like Biden has and Democratic presidents always have. He was a president of peace. So if we bring him back, potentially he could maybe start making deals to where people aren't constantly against the U.S., especially economically, and we can start making deals with other nations and quit isolating ourselves and ultimately killing ourselves as a nation by completely isolating ourselves. Then maybe we can start moving forward. Maybe Russia and China won't feel so inclined to cyber attack us and make economic alliances that go against us. Shoot, maybe there won't be a need for BRICS anymore. Maybe we can all start trading with each other's currencies unless it's either the US dollar or nothing. Maybe we should be open to other ideas. So, all that to say, there is a new world order forming, and the West is losing its power. The unipolar world is over. The multipolar world is here. How are we going to adapt to that? We're not doing a very good job right now. It's not too late to change course, but some changes need to happen, and we're not making those changes right now. So let's hope and pray as American citizens that somebody wakes up and realizes what's going on here. Changes need to be made. We need to stop making everybody our enemy, especially the two other global superpowers, and come to the table and negotiate on some things. Let's start with the Ukrainian war. First off, that's been over for years. It's been a stalemate for years. Let's stop sanctioning people, because clearly they don't work anymore. Let's start making more allies and enemies globally. Let's start there. And then let's start worrying about stuff on the home front like inflation and terrorists coming into our country. And maybe we can start moving forward as a nation. Hopefully they come to that realization. They're not right now. Something to keep an eye on. The multipolar world is here, like I said. And the United States, this is a make or break moment for us as a nation. Will we adapt to it, or will we die ultimately as a country? And going down with the ship, per se. We're going to go out, we're going to be on top, or we're going to die trying, is the route we're going right now. It's not too late to change course, but some changes need to be made. So, all right, that's all the topics for today. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll be back tomorrow for another episode.